everybody, it's Callie Van Laanen bringing you a program on poisonous plants. A little bit about my history is I graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point with a degree in environmental education, and I've been bringing programs to the community ever since. Right now, I really enjoy my time with Green Adventures in the Becoming an Outdoors Woman program, and I get to guide trips all across the whole country and internationally as well. Today, I'm going to be bringing you a program on poisonous plants because this is a big topic that everybody's getting more outside and enjoying the outdoors a lot more right now. And I love to see that, but I also like people to be safe and not have a bad experience with the outdoors. So with that, I'll bring you poisonous plants. So summer's a great time to explore Wisconsin's abundant outdoors, but camping, hiking, biking, even kayaking can lead to encounters with poisonous plants that cause skin irritations and injuries when touched. So knowing these types of plants can help you avoiding them and minimize the level of damage following your exposure to them. And then also by taking necessary precautions, it'll give you a better outdoor experience and a safer experience. So could these poisonous plants ruin your summer? I'm going to start with 3 really common poisonous plants: poison ivy, poison oak, and poison sumac. I would say in central Wisconsin and northern Wisconsin, the one that we have to worry about most is poison ivy, but it's important to know about all 3. So first and foremost, what do they look like? Poison ivy has 3 leaves, not 5, that connect to the stem. It doesn't have any thorns. And here's what's tricky is it can grow as either a vine or a shrub. The leaves can be red, green, or even slightly yellow. It is a very, very tricky plant to identify. So sometimes you'll see even seasoned naturalists have trouble identifying it. And it's not because your naturalist doesn't know what they're talking about. It's because it's a tricky plant to identify. So I'm going to try and give you all of the different forms that it takes so that you know what to look for. Poison sumac grows on a small tree or shrub in wet climate. Now, a lot of us know common sumac trees here that have a staghorn sumac has the red flowers at the end of it. A lot of times you'll see people who are foragers will use it to make a lemonade, but we're going to talk about poison sumac. But what I want you to do is think about the staghorn sumac and look for these other identifiers. They have red stems, 9 to 13 leaflets per stem, and then parallel rows of upward growing leaves. Poison oak. If you can take a look at the leaves on this, you'll see that they look almost like an oak leaf. They have 3 leaves that connect to the single stem. Leaves resemble oak tree limbs. There are no thorns, and the leaves grow in the same pattern as poison ivy. How do I get rashes and skin reactions from these things? Well, you can get it by breathing in the smoke, by touching it directly, or even by touching something that has touched the plant, like a shovel, gardening gloves, or your shirt. What you won't see on here is that it's a common myth that you can get poison ivy from the little blisters that you already have on your skin from touching it, from the liquid that's in those blisters. And that's actually untrue. You will not get more poison ivy or any of these other rashes by the liquid that's in your blisters. What do I do if I get it? Or what do you do if you come in contact with it? Well, number one, take a shower. Take a cold shower to rinse off any of the urushiol. That's the oil that causes the rash. Wash your clothes. Make sure that you wash your clothes in a detergent and with warm water. And then if you get the rash, you can get it over-the-counter cream to put on the rash to help it relieve the symptoms and dry up any rashes. Here's some neat and unconventional home remedies that people don't always think about. You can pour vodka on the rash. The alcohol from vodka reduces the itching and removes the urushiol from the skin. A cool one is to rub a banana peel on the rash because the banana peels are full of antioxidants and minerals and the vitamins that can relieve itching. You can apply a cucumber or cucumber slices. They have a powerful antioxidant and flavonoids that can reduce the irritation. Some fun ones you can do, especially in the summertime, are take a swim in salt water or a pool, or take an oatmeal bath. So we're going to get into those reasons why poison ivy is a little bit of a tricky plant to identify. So it's a well-known native plant to Wisconsin. It grows as an erect woody shrub or as a vine. So there aren't many plants that you can see that grow as both a shrub and a vine. So that makes it tricky. It has distinct compound leaves with 3 leaflets, with the middle segment slightly larger in size. Sometimes you'll hear people in Wisconsin say, leaves of 3, let it be. And that's a good indicator, but not all plants that have 3 leaves are dangerous. Sometimes people will say, berries white, run and fright, and berries white, danger in sight. And that's because, as you see in the picture on this page, the berries from poison ivy are white. Another saying is, red leaflets in spring, it's a dangerous thing. And this actually makes it easier for me to identify the plant in the springtime because it has this kind of reddish, shiny leaf. Another saying is, if butterflies land there, don't put your hand there. Which is, I think, an interesting one. The next one is another indicator that I use quite a bit. It's hairy vine, no friend of mine, and raggedy rope, don't be a dope. If you can see in the picture, you'll see that the roots from the vine are rooted to the tree, and it makes it look like a hairy rope. And that's a definite indicator, especially when you don't see the leaves. So sometimes you can actually even get poison ivy in the winter. I've had a friend who got it sledding when the snow was worn down on the sledding hill, and she came in contact with the stem of the plant and got a terrible outbreak in February. So even if you can't see the leaves, it's still something to be cautious of. The next fun saying is, longer middle stem, stay away from them. And that's just showing that the 2 leaves on the outside meet straight up to the stem, but the leaf in the middle has a longer stem, and that's a really good way to also identify poison ivy. The last one is side leaflets like mittens. It will itch like the dickens. And so if you look at the last picture on this page, you'll see that the leaves actually have little mitten shapes. They can have little mitten shapes. They can actually almost look like oak leaves at times too. So if you've had problems identifying poison ivy in the past, know that you are not alone because it can be a really tricky plant to identify. So if you look on this page, you'll see some of the differences that we've already talked about of why this plant is so tricky to identify. And every single one of these 9 pictures shows poison ivy. And if you look at it, every single one is different. And that's what makes it so hard to identify. But by learning to look at these and know that they're poison ivy, it'll give you a good indicator of whether the plant you're looking at is actually poison ivy or not. So the leaves aren't droopy and they can actually be yellowish or reddish, and they're usually very shiny. They can also be bright green. And then if you look in the middle, you can see that the leaves can actually be either wide, but most often they've got the thumbs on the outside, like the mittens. But don't be tricked, because it also can have no thumbs. And surprise, they can be droopy too. One of the major things that I look for when there aren't leaves on the plant are for the hairy bark. And this has a really good picture of that on the lower right. Another one that's getting more common in our area is wild parsnip. And wild parsnip can be a little bit of a challenge to identify because it can look like some other common plants like Queen Anne's lace. But you look at this, it has a yellow flower. It's really widespread along roadsides, among prairies, and in any disturbed landscapes, mostly in sunny areas. It's an invasive species, and it's actually really taking over in the central Wisconsin and other areas. So it's a plant that is coming to more attention to people. But it's not as well known as, say, poison ivy, that people are just learning to identify wild parsnip. Its leaves look similar to those of celery plants. If you can look at the top picture, they have 5 to 15 sharp-toothed leaflets. The plant's stem is smooth and deeply ridged, like celery, and it has a distinctive yellow, flat flower head that blooms from mid-June to July. Here's the scary part. The sap contains a chemical which causes severe rashes, blisters, and discoloration of the skin, especially when that area is exposed to sunlight. It can actually really be quite dangerous. So if you ever come into contact with wild parsnip, get out of the sun and wash the area right away. Flush the skin with large amounts of water without rubbing. Then use soap on the skin to remove the residue. Don't rub it with a washcloth because that can force the burning chemicals deeper into your skin. But very much like the other poisonous plants that we've seen, soap will take the chemicals off. Here's one that's an interesting poisonous plant. And the reason it's poisonous is because it can cause a skin reaction. This is stinging nettle. This plant, it's a native plant that grows in the full sun and damp, fertile soil. And it's really super common along fence rows, in ditches, around gardens. It has a distinct square stem with tiny stinging hairs along its surface. The oval-shaped leaves have opposite orientations. They're sawtoothed and have stinging hairs on the lower surface of the blade. It can grow from 2 to 7 feet tall and produces yellow greenish flowers in clusters from June to September. The little stinging hairs act as a hypodermic needle, injecting toxins that cause a localized pain, followed by a reddish swelling, sometimes prolonged itching and numbness. Now, it's categorized as a poisonous plant because it creates that skin redden. Sometimes it'll create little almost bumps like what a mosquito would. But the good thing about stinging nettle is that reaction goes away fairly quickly, much unlike the poisonous plants is like poison ivy. So to treat stinging nettle, try not to touch the area so you don't rub the chemicals released by the plant further into your skin. After about 10 minutes, wash your skin with soap and water or a clean cloth. And alternatively, you can apply aloe or a paste made out of baking soda and water. Here's a fun note about stinging nettle. Although it can be a poisonous plant to your skin by these little hairs on the plant breaking off into your skin and creating a skin reaction, it's actually not poisonous when ingested. You can actually eat stinging nettle when it's prepared the right way. And so usually young shoots are sauteed, and what happens is it destroys all those little stinging hairs, and it's a really nutritional plant. So although a plant can in one way be poisonous, it might not be poisonous to eat. Now, for all of the plants that I've shown you today, the only case that this is in stinging nettle. So please don't eat any sort of plant that you aren't really familiar with or that you don't have some sort of professional forager helping you along. But that's just a crazy little side note on poisonous plants. So what I don't want you to be is afraid to get outside. So stay safe and don't be afraid to get out there. Just learn the facts about plants that can hurt you and follow the guidelines that you now know. Thank you for joining this lesson. I hope to bring you lots more. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me further. Thanks a lot. Bye, everybody.